So here are the cattle in the front. You know, we ain't took a look at these cattle in a long time. But here are the animals going to market. You got this one right here, that one right there, that one over there, and then the red one right there. And you can take a look at them. You know, got some big cattle, right? I would say that these animals are probably, you know, well, this one is a bit, maybe a little bit bigger than him. They're gonna weigh about the same, all right? I would say that they're probably gonna hit the scale at about maybe 750, 800 right now. They're getting close to about probably somewhere between, he's probably closer to 750 and he's probably closer to about 775, 800. And then I got that gray animal over there, and then I got the red heifer right there. And that red heifer right there, she probably weighs about maybe about a 675, maybe about a 6. She's a little bit heavier than 650, I would say. And yeah, she probably about a 650, 675, something like that. And so, you know, and the big idea right now was that I was going to take these animals to market here in about 3 weeks. And so those are the 4 animals that are going to be going. This one, that one, that one, and that one. And they'll probably hit the scale at about, you know, the 4 of them combined will probably hit the scale at about 750, 775, something like that. And so this is what the animals look like. You know, I know we ain't took a look at them in a couple of days, maybe about a week, but you know, they're still here and they're still good to go. You know, they're still eating the feed. And this animal, some of them actually got a little bit of diarrhea on their rear end. And so it may just be from eating wet grass. And so I don't think it's from acidosis. If these animals were having acidosis, I would know, because they would be bloating, right? And there's that big old Charolais calf right there. This is that Charolais calf, but this Charolais calf, the thing about the Charolais calf is that he has a massive frame. All right, he has a massive frame. He is growing very quickly. And if you actually take a look at him, he's actually already taller than the heifer. All right, this Charolais calf, when I brought him in, he was 330 pounds, and he outgrew the rest of the animals. He completely outgrew the rest of the animals. He has a massive frame. And so this is the biggest framed animal, one of the biggest framed animals that I have ever seen. When I brought him in, he was about the same weight as these Herefords. He was about the same weight as these Herefords, and he's probably already 200 pounds, maybe 100 pounds heavier than the rest of them. But but so I'm not gonna, you know, he's an outlier. He's an animal that just has a massive frame. I mean, he is growing very fast. When I brought him in, he was maybe 100 pounds heavier than the rest of the animals that I brought in. But as of today, I mean, he is substantially larger. No, I mean, he's actually taller than that red heifer in front of him. And look at how short his tail is, and look at how long her tail is. Right, her tail is probably 6 inches off the ground, and his tail is between his knees. So I mean, this calf is a very, 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 very long, you know, very, very, very large framed animal. And you can take a look at him, you know, and if you see where his tail's at, you know, I've always said that one of the most, you know, in terms of if you want to take a look at the age of the animal, and you don't want to get too close to the animal. Let's say you're far away and you want, but this is a very good example of this, you know, is to look at the length of the tail of the animal. And you see this animal right here too. His tail is between his knees, right? His tail's about between his knees. And so that's how you know that this calf is young. This calf is probably about a year old. I mean, he's probably just about a year old, and he looks like this. And that animal over there, her tail is about 6 inches off the ground. And so, you know, she's a little bit of a smaller framed animal with a little bit more age on her. And if you take a look at the other, but you know, the length of the tail in proportion of their body is a good indicator of the age of the animal and the frame size of the animal. Okay, you know, if they got a real long tail, you know, they probably got a little bit of age on them. And if they you know, and then it's also indicative of their frame size. This heifer right here is probably a little bit of a smaller framed animal. All right, but she's also kind of thin. All right, she's also a little bit thin. I wouldn't, you know, when I take a look at her, I wouldn't say that she's you know, she's fat. And you want them to be a little bit fat. You want them to be a little bit fat. That's where you make your money. But I've only had her here for about a month. And so, she's a little bit thin. All right, she's a little bit thin. If she was proper weight, she would probably be 700-800 pounds. All right, she probably weighs about 650, 675 right now. All right, she honestly probably needs to put on about another 100 pounds before I would say that she's not thin. All right, she probably needs to put on about another 100 pounds, but her tail is already 6 inches off the ground. And so, her tail is well past her knees, and so that's indicative of the frame size of the animal and the age of the animal. But I'm supposed to be getting some rain here in about an hour. It's supposed to start raining, but I really need some rain on my lease property. All right, I need rain on my lease property. If I have some rain here, that's fantastic too, but I need some rain on my lease property. The whole thing is that that lease property right now, the water is starting to rot. The water is starting to rot. And so I need some water on the lease property. But let's take a look at all of this. And over the last couple of days, I've been saying, okay, so $17,000 a month. The whole idea about $17,000 a month, and I wanted to tie this all back into everything. $17,000 a month. If I was legitimately going to look at how much money I make, that's a different scenario than how much money, I bring home on a month-to-month basis, right? Because when I bring home money on a month-to-month basis, I am not liquidating my entire asset portfolio, right? I'm taking a look at my asset portfolio and I'm determining how much should I pay myself and how will I do that. So if I were to actually take a look, okay, so, and this is also what I mean, in terms of financials, all right? And if you want to know exactly what is going on with your financials, ask an accountant. Don't take my word for it. I'm just here to put you in the right direction, okay? Go and ask an accountant. All right, go and ask an accountant, ask an accountant. I started this business. I run this business. I have these assets. What kind of a tax benefit do I have? This is how much money I make on a yearly basis. How much of a tax benefit? What is my tax situation? Ask an accountant. All right, ask an accountant. Don't take my word for it. So the whole situation with this right now is that if I were legitimately going to take a look at how much money I make, I would have to be liquidating all of my animals at the end of the year, which I don't do. Why would I ever do that? All right, $17,000 a month is what I pay myself. It is not the amount of money that my business makes. My business makes substantially more than that. All right, I pay myself $17,000. When I do that, how do I do that? Why do I do that? And then what do I do with the money? I pay myself that money by liquidating some of my biggest animals. I don't take my smallest animal out of the preconditioning pen and take them to the market. I take my biggest animals, the ones that I have made the most money on, and I take them to the market, and then that pulls money out of the investment, right? That pulls money out of the investment, and then I pay myself. I take that money and then I go and buy new calves with it. I do not liquidate all of my animals at the same time. $17,000 a month is what I pay myself. It is not what my business makes. This is very important to understand, because and just from me just talking about business, me giving you advice or not I've always said I don't give advice. I mean, die tomorrow, I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, all right? I don't give advice. I actually do this in real life. I actually do it, right? And I talk about this, I actually do it. All right, I'm not giving anybody advice. I'm not giving anybody my opinion. I actually do this in real life, and I'm telling you how I do it. I actually do this in real life. The whole thing is that nobody cares. Either you can or you can't. And if you can't, nobody cares. All right, and the thing is that, if you wanted to go and buy yourself a 20-acre field and you wanted to buy yourself 250 cattle a year and you wanted to buy 200 cattle a year, nobody is stopping you. Go and have fun. Let's see you do it. All right, because I actually do it. I actually do this stuff. This is not my opinion. All right, nobody cares. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, nobody cares. Die poor. Have fun with your mystical, magical journey. All right, nobody cares. Either you can or you can't. And when I talk about money, You have to understand that, you know, in terms of the dollars that I make are just as, it is just as hard for me to make a dollar as it is for anybody else. Just as hard. Farming was not magically easier for me. All right, it was not magically easier for me. If you want to go and you want to know what it's like to make $35,000 a month, then go and do it. Nobody's stopping you. You know, I would say I probably make somewhere between 25 and 35,000. If I legitimately sat there with my business plan and I liquidated all of my animals at the end of the year, and I said, you know what, I just want to figure out how much money I made, and I put all the cash together, I would probably somewhere between 350 and 500,000. I probably do. All right, you know, $17,000 a month is not what my business makes. $17,000 a month is what I pay myself. Why do I pay myself that money? To grow the size of my business, right? I take the biggest animals out of my herd, animals like this, the big ones, right? Him. I take the big ones. These animals, you know, I brought them in at about 275 pounds and I put them on this grass. All right, I brought in these animals at about 275 pounds and then I put them on the grass. Now they're this weight. When I liquidate these animals, guess what? I will make more money than I put into them. Maybe even double. It costs me on average about $15 a month to grow grass for the animals, and I grow grass about 7 to 8 months out of the year. All right, you know, it's a very, very, very small amount of money. The money is borderline negligible. It is negligible, and I've talked about this in terms. My margins are so high. My margins are so high that if I stopped, okay. And another way to look at this is if I stopped farming, I would hemorrhage hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Hundreds of thousands. My net worth would drop by millions of dollars. Farming does not cost me anything. It makes me money. Makes me a massive amount of money. When I take a look at it, $17,000 a month is not what my business makes. It is what I pay myself. My business makes more than that. Right? I leave money in the business. All right, you know, and I would suggest that, you know, if you're scraping every dollar that you can out of your business, that's not good. All right, that's not good. You know, why would you do that? You know, I leave money in the business. All right, I leave money in the business. I do not liquidate all of my animals at the same time. If I were to figure out how much cash, you know, how much money do I make? If I were to figure that out, if I were to sit here and think about how much money do I make, I would have to liquidate all of my animals at the end of the year, and I would have made money the entire year. All right, as of today, I probably make somewhere around 350, 500. All right, probably do. And guess what? My income is actually going up. $17,000 a month is what I pay myself. It is not what my business makes. Why do I keep money in the business? It is an unrealized gain. The value of my assets are going up. Granted that I continue to do my part, right? Granted that I continue to raise the animals, the value of the animals will go up. That is an unrealized gain, and I do not need to pay taxes on those gains until I pay myself. All right, that's why. Then this is how you make large amounts of money with very good tax benefits. I don't make the rules. I just play the game. All right, the government can't come walking in here and say, oh, your animals weigh 600 pounds on the average, and you brought them in at 275 pounds, and the feeder cattle market is sitting at 287. We need to take an appraisal value for your animals, and then you need to pay taxes on your unrealized gains. The government cannot do that. I don't make the rules. If they want to do that, then if that becomes the rules, it cannot just become the rules for me. And I talk about this all the time. Farming is not easy. Making money is not easy. See if you can find anybody that makes $40,000 a month starting their own business, $35,000 a month starting their own business. And granted, and guess what? I'm actually going to do better for myself. I've already decided what am I going to do with the money. I will reinvest it all back into my business. All right. I will reinvest it all back into my business, all right? And when I do that, I will make more money back. So when I take a look, the whole thing about this is that, okay, the game is the game, all right? And I'm telling you how to play the game, all right? And when it comes to playing the game, I am effectively one of the top performers in the whole thing. One of the best. All right, I legitimately make drastically more money than 99.99999% of the entire country, and I'm actually probably going to even raise my income. I start my own businesses, and I cash flow large amounts of money. All right, I legitimately drastically outperformed the entire economy. Just about. It wasn't even close. And I am telling you how to play the game. I'm telling you this is how you play the game. You buy good assets that you believe, produce some kind of a positive return. It could be anything. It could be the S&P 500 that produces a dividend. It's a good asset. It could be the treasury bond. The treasury bond produces a yield and it is backed by the U.S. government. All right, you're effectively buying these assets from the U.S. government, which is, in America, the S&P 500 is the 500 biggest, companies in America. America is the best economy on the entire planet. By a long shot. It doesn't even get close. All right, it doesn't matter. As long as you are collecting good assets and those assets are producing you a positive return, if you do that for a long enough period of time, you will effectively never worry about money again. If you bought $2,000 worth of the S&P 500 for the rest of your life, every single month, for the rest of your life, after a certain point, you would not worry about money ever again. Ever. All right, if you bought $2,000 worth of the S&P 500 every month for the rest of your life, after about 4 or 5 years, you would never worry about money again. Granted that you didn't turn into an idiot. All right, granted that you did not turn into an idiot, you would make money and you would not worry about money for the rest of your life. All right, it doesn't matter what asset you choose as long as you understand your asset. Buy a good asset. The asset should produce you a positive return and highly equitable. And I am telling you, okay, let's say that you buy the S&P 500 at whatever, let's say you buy the SPY at whatever, let's say, whatever, $575 a share, and the value of the SPY goes up to $625. The extra $50 that the S&P went up, the SPY went up, you do not have to pay taxes on those unrealized gains. It's the same exact thing. Unless you liquidate your stock and pull your money out the portfolio, you do not have to pay taxes on those gains. All right, this is how you make money. This is how you make large amounts of money. More money than anybody. Drastically more money than anybody. All right, this is how you do it. You buy good assets you buy good assets that produce positive returns, and then you hold on to them forever. That's how you make money, and you do that for the rest of your life. You will never worry about money again. When you take a look at my situation, okay, and the whole thing about this is that the whole thing is like if the rules of the game change, I will tell you. All right, if the rules change, I will tell you, but they cannot change for just me, right? Because then that would be unjust. And I talk about this in terms of a realistic sense, and everything is not a game. All right, everything is not a game. Life is not an adventure. You're not going to Disneyland your entire life. And then, it's not going to happen. All right. I'm telling you, people, sometimes you have people that are legitimately malicious. Sometimes you have people that are idiots. Sometimes you have people that, whatever, right? There are legitimately people that sit around and just do nothing and then hope that other people fail. Legitimately, that kind of stuff happens all the time. And I've talked about this. Let's say you take a fraction of the money that I make. Let's just say you took a fraction of the money that I make. This cattle farm makes me about whatever, $35,000 a month, right? It makes me about $35,000. I started this business on my own, and I run the business by myself. I legitimately do everything on my own, just about 99% of it. All right, 98% of it, I do it by myself. I grow the grass by myself. I raise the cattle by myself. I buy the animals by myself. I run the business by myself. I do it all by myself. All right, and I produce about $35,000 a month, and my income is actually going up. All right, it's going up, and it's going up very quickly. I've actually talked about this in terms of a point of inflection. My income is going up very quickly. Very quickly. It's actually going up exponentially. And when you take a look at what I do, starting a business and making money is a very, 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 good skill to have. All right, if you can start a business and have that business produce money, my business costs me about $1,200 a month. All right, it costs me about $1,200 a month. I grow the grass with it, and et cetera, et cetera. All right, my business costs about $1,200 a month, and it produces about let's say $35,000. So for 35,000, for $1,200, I am able to turn that money into about $35,000 a month. And I am not the only person that can do this, right? I talked about this in terms of a broader perspective. If you really need to open your mind. Warren Buffett could also probably do this. When I took a look at everything going on, Warren Buffett could probably even do better than that. Warren Buffett probably could, okay? There are other people in other aspects of the economy that can do what I do with money. Do I know anybody that can do it with farming? No, I'm the only one that can do. I don't even know anybody that even does 10% when it comes to farming. Okay, I don't even know anybody that does even 10%. Most people can't even make $3,500 a month on a 10.5 acre field. Most people can't. A majority of people can't. All right, and I don't know anybody that even does 10% when it comes to farming. Not even 10%. Nobody cares about an opinion. If you legitimately know somebody that can do it, then show them to me. All right, let's talk about money. Let's talk about business. Let's talk about running cattle. Let's talk about growing grass. Let me see this person. All right, I haven't seen it to this day. All right, I effectively outperformed the whole shebang. All right, the entire thing. And my income is actually going up. Everything is not a game. All right, everything is not a game. Oh, just turn it into a game. Oh, just turn it into a game. I'm telling you, when you go into the real world, when you go into like real life, everything is not a game. Sometimes your animals die. That's not a game. Sometimes you mess up and it costs whatever, right? That's not a game. Sometimes, when you're running, everything is not a game. Sometimes you can turn it into a game. Everything is not a game. All right. And I've always said that, the whole thing about turning things into a game, and a very realistic time to do this is when you're an infant. All right. Like when you're like 5. If you're dealing with a child that is like 3, 5 years old, you can turn things into a game because they do not understand the gravity of the situation, which they probably won't for a long time, maybe even 15 years or so. And their mind is you can teach a 5-year-old child to do anything. Granted that they have average IQ, you can teach them to do anything. And that is a very good time to introduce things as a game. Right? That is a very good time. Oh, it's kind of fun and it's kind of cute. Right? It's kind of fun and it's kind of cute. You got a little animal and this animal's getting fat. The little fat animal has a purple ear tag, and the purple ear tag belongs to you. Right? And it's just kind of a fun little cute little game, right? Oh, we got a patch of grass and we're just gonna put this thing on the grass and it's gonna make the grass grow and we can watch the grass grow, and it's kind of a game. When after a certain point, if that is how you think, if you turn everything into a game, if you turn everything into a magical adventure, you're either naive or you're an idiot. After a certain point, it is not a game. All right. Well, after a certain point, it could be whenever, right? When you start having to take the responsibilities for yourself, you will now have to go and run the business by yourself. You will now have to go and, start this business by yourself and run these cattle by yourself and make your money by yourself. Then it is not a game. It is not a game after that point. You need to be able to do things, right? You need to be able to perform. You need to be able to do things that, you need to be capable, all right? You cannot just be an infant, naive idiot. All right, you actually need to be able to do things. Nobody cares about your opinion, all right? You actually need to be capable. If you actually, because everything, after a certain point, everything is not a game. A very good time to turn things into a game is when you're an infant. If you're 5 years old, if you're 3 years old, if you're 7 years old, sure, you can turn things into a game. Oh, it's kind of cute and it's kind of funny. But after a certain point, you need to understand that things are not a game. The world is not some Disneyland adventure. People are legitimately malicious. And I talked about this. This happens a lot. I'm not talking about but I talked about this in terms of a broader perspective. Let's take a fraction of the money that I make on my farm. Let's say we take 25%. Let's say we take $10,000 a month. That's about 25% of the money that I make. Do you know how many people would legitimately sell their soul to the devil for $10,000 a month? Effectively everybody. Almost everybody, all right? It doesn't matter. Effectively everybody. All right, and that's a fraction of the money that I make, 25%, just about, give or take. I make about $35,000 a month, and my income is actually going upwards. So let's talk about this in terms of a realistic perspective. When I give you my perspective, what do I see in the world? As somebody who makes such a drastic amount of money, and I can effectively make this money whenever I want. I just go and start myself farms whenever I feel like it. I started myself another farm already on my lease property, right? And I'm making money on that property as well. I can start these farms whenever I feel like it. Whenever I feel like it, and I make a massive amount of money doing it. So let's take a fraction of the money that I make, $10,000 a month. That's about 25% of the money that I make. Pretty soon it'll be even less, all right? I'm actually looking into growing the size of my business. I have a lot of money coming in, and I'm going to reinvest that back into my business, okay? So let's take a fraction of the money that I make, $10,000 a month. How many people do you know that would legitimately sell their soul for $10,000 a month? Effectively everybody. Effectively everybody. That's the situation that I'm in. That, you have to, and I'm not asking for compassion. I'm not asking that you give me a pity party. I'm just saying, understand the situation that I'm in. Just understand it, okay? That's the situation that I'm in. I effectively do all of this by myself. I make a massive amount of money. I effectively make drastically more money than 99.99999% of the entire country. And I do it by myself. All right, effectively by myself, 98% of it. And I've always said, when I talk about doing things by myself, I'm not talking about it from like a selfish perspective. I read a lot of books, okay? There are things that, if I did not have access to the information like the internet and have access to the information, then I would not have been able to learn this stuff on my own. I read a lot of books, collected a lot of good information, watched presentations on people that, a person running a dietary program for a feed yard with 120,000 animals, and they do a presentation on the internet for free about cattle diet. Oh, well, when we use, sometimes when the price of hay in our local area drops, then we take the hay and we mix it with distiller grains and corn, and you can actually feed a higher percentage of distiller grains and corn and put more weight on the animal if you just put a little bit of calcium carbonate in their food, because that calcium carbonate will stop the animals from having urinary calculi. Right, you put a couple more cents into their feed, and you can get a half a pound of gain extra on the animal for for very, very, very minimal cost. Right, stuff like that. I read, I can read stuff, and I can watch presentations on people on the internet for free. Right, very good information, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I encourage. Like, it's like, if you want to go and find information, go and find information from stuff like that. All right, go and read a book, go and watch a presentation on somebody who actually knows what they're doing. If you ask a bunch of bums what they think about, what do you think they're going to tell you? All right, what do you think they're going to tell you, right? I mean, do you think that they're going to tell you to go and read a book? Do you think that they're going to tell you to go on the internet and find published publication, scientific published papers? Do you think that they're going to tell you to go and, oh, well, there's a person on the internet, with running a feed yard, and they're the head veterinarian for 100,000 animals, and this is how they run their medication program. This is how they run their vaccinations. These are the kind of vaccinations that they use. This is why they use them. Do you think that they're going to tell you that? No, they're not. Probably not. All right, and I'm not looking to whatever bash the but I'm just giving you my situation. All right, if I were to legitimately take a look at how much money I make, I would have to consider selling all of my animals at the end of the year, and that would be how much money I make. And do you know how many animals I'll be buying by the end of the year, and how much money I will make along the way? I mean, I'll be buying, probably, I may even end up the year buying closer to, 400 animals for the year. All right, I may legitimately end up, because buying somewhere closer to 400 animals for the year, 350. All right, if I don't buy very many, I'll buy like 200, 225. All right, but that's the situation that I'm in, and I'm not asking for a pity party. I'm not being malicious about it. I'm not being malicious about it. And I've always said that the whole thing about stuff like this is, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. Opinions don't matter. I actually do this stuff in real life. I actually do it in real life, okay? Nobody cares about an opinion. Die poor with your opinion. Your opinion doesn't mean anything. I actually do this stuff. I actually do this in real life. Nobody cares about an opinion. What is your opinion going to do for you? And I've already talked about this. If you don't learn how to do stuff like this, then you're not born to do this. Or nobody was born to do this. Chances are you were born average, and if you're not careful, you'll actually go downhill your entire life. All right, You have to learn how to do stuff like this. And if you want to learn how to do stuff like this, you need to effectively understand that when it comes to like, the cattle health, I have some of the best results in the world. When it comes to growing grass, I have some of the best results in the world. When it comes to running a business, starting a business, I effectively have some of the best results in the world on all three categories. All right, learning how to do stuff like this is going to take a long time. A long time. This is not stuff that you just wake up one day and you just intuitively know. You're going to have to learn how to do this. How to take mineral data from your soil by observing plant material. Right? How to anticipate how much minerals your plants will metabolize and in what ratios your plants will metabolize these ratios according to your weather and depending on what type of grass you're growing or what kind of plant material you're growing. All this stuff takes time to learn, and it's going to take a lot of practice. You cannot skip the work. I can give you all of the information. I can give you the best information that I can, but if you do not go out and do the work, you cannot make it. It doesn't matter what you think. If you think otherwise, you'll die poor. If you legitimately think that you can just wake up one day and go and do something like this, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You're a bum. All right? Nobody cares. Let's see it. I actually do this stuff in real life. All right? I actually do this stuff. This isn't an opinion for me. My cattle are not fake. My grass is not fake. My checks are not fake. All right, and I tell you how I do all of this stuff, right? I tell you how I do everything. I put a lot of emphasis on, and I've already said, because the whole thing about it is, talk is cheap, okay? And, I can almost, but here's the thing. I have not seen anybody do 10% my entire life. Have not seen it to this day. It doesn't matter where I look. I could look around on YouTube. I could go any which way. Sometimes I go to the north to go to the sale barn. Sometimes I go to the northwest to go to a sale barn. Sometimes I go to the southwest to go to a sale barn. Sometimes I go to the east to go to the sale barn. I take a look around when I go to the sale barns. I haven't seen anybody to this day do 10%. I haven't seen anybody do 10%. All right, not one person, and there's no reason for that. I effectively took a dump on the entire U.S. economy by a long shot. It wasn't even close. All right, and this is not my opinion. I am telling you, this is not my opinion. All right, this is not my opinion. This is real life. My cattle are real. My business is real. My grass is real. It is what it is. Okay. But just understand things from my perspective. All right, if I took a fraction of the money that I made and I offered it to somebody or somebody, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. How many people in the world do you think would sell their soul to the devil for a minuscule amount of money, $10,000 a month, a worthless amount of money? It's about 25% of the money that I make. How many people do you think would sell their soul to the devil for $10,000 a month? You could probably write down 98% of the entire country's population. You could probably write down 98% of the entire world's population. Everybody would sell their soul for $10,000 a month. Just about everybody. Who wouldn't do it? I wouldn't do it, because why do I care about $10,000? I don't care about $10,000. All right. Why would I care about $10,000? I make $10,000 sometimes, in 3 days. All right. Sometimes I legitimately make $10,000 in like less than a week. Why would I care about it? All right, but how many people do you know would sell their soul for a minuscule amount of money? Let's talk about $10,000 a month, a worthless amount of money. How many people do you know would sell their soul to the devil for that much money? Practically everybody. That's the situation that I'm in. And I have to effectively work alone all the time because of that. If people offered me good deals, I would be very happy. All right, I love to do business. All right, but, people will sell their soul for anything. A worthless amount of money, $10,000, people, boom, sold their soul. $10,000 a month, sold their soul for no reason. All right, and I encourage this all the time. Go out and actually do the work. Start putting in the practice. Even if you mess it up, which, you should not be completely messing it up. All right, if you're going 180 degrees in the wrong direction, that is very bad. All right, if you have a field and you're like, oh, well, if I just sit here on this field and I don't fertilize it, then I can just put my wrong. Okay, I don't, you're going 180, as long as you understand, the basics and you have the right idea, then you're good to go, right? If you want to start a business, start an LLC and call an accountant. Tell them about your business and, keep your receipts. All right, and then, if you want to run cattle, find out what a beef animal is, okay? Find out what a beef animal is, and I would suggest getting into the commercial beef industry. All right, it has the most amount of money in it. Vaccinate your animals, give your animals the proper medications, put them on the right type of feed, grow the grass. As long as you're going in the right direction, it does not matter. All right, and if you practice for a long period of time, if you get to the 10% mark, you can actually practice for free. And when you take a look at my numbers, I probably I turn about $1,200 a month into about $35,000. All right, that's what my numbers look like. If you did even 10% of what I did, then you could practice for free. You could practice for free, okay? And then at that point, if you practice for a long period of time, then one day you could make it too. And, nobody cares about an opinion, okay? Nobody cares about an opinion, especially not me. Why would I care? Why, if it comes down to it, I will legitimately just, if you cannot be saved, I will leave you to die poor, and I will watch you die poor. And then I will just going to be rich by myself. Do I maliciously want that to happen? No, I don't. All right, and do I want that to happen? No, I don't. But what am I supposed to do about it? I mean, I can't save, I don't save people. Either you do it or you don't. Nobody cares about your opinion. All right, if you're practically a bum, you can't be saved. Save yourself. All right, and that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.